90 days from tonight, the people who know you will not be able to name what changed about you. They will notice. That part is reliable. What they will not be able to do is point at it, because nothing on the outside will have changed enough to explain it, and the thing that did change does not have a visible location. That is the claim, and I am aware of how it sounds. 90 days is a suspiciously round number, and every third person on the internet is selling a 90-day something. So let me be exact about what I am and am not saying, because the difference matters. I am not promising that your circumstances will be transformed in 3 months. Some of them will not have moved at all. What I am telling you is that at day 90, you will be operating as somebody else, and that this happens on a schedule, in a sequence, with a predictable point in the middle where nearly everybody stops. And the reason it works is the opposite of what most people assume. You are not going to think your way into this. You are not going to believe your way into it either. You are going to act your way in, badly at first, and the belief is going to arrive afterwards, as a consequence, in a form you did not expect. That is the whole method, and we are going to walk the 90 days in 5 phases. Here is the shape of it, so you know where we are going. The first phase is days 1 to 7, and it is one decision and one behavior much smaller than you want it to be. The second is days 8 to 21, which is the stretch where nothing happens, and I am going to explain exactly what is happening during the nothing. The third is days 22 to 45, which is where it collapses for most people, and it does not collapse for the reason you are expecting. The fourth is days 46 to 70, when the evidence starts arriving from outside you. And the fifth is days 71 to 90, when it stops being an act, which is a specific event with a recognizable feeling, and I will tell you what to look for. Phase 1, days 1 to 7, the one behavior. The first mistake is almost universal, and it kills more of these attempts than anything that comes later. People decide to become a whole person. They write down the disciplined, calm, confident, generous, focused version of themselves, and then on the morning of day 1, they attempt to be all of it at once. By Thursday, they have failed at 4 separate things simultaneously and concluded that they are not a person who follows through, which is the exact belief they were trying to overwrite. They have made it worse in 4 days. You do not act as if you are a different person. That is not a doable instruction. It is an aesthetic. You act as if in one specific, physical, repeatable behavior, and you let the person come afterwards. So here is the work of the first week, and it is one question. What is the smallest thing you do differently on an ordinary day that only the person you want to become would do? Not the biggest thing, the smallest. It has to be small enough that you could do it on your worst day in a bad mood at 11 at night with a headache. Because you will have that day, probably twice, and the whole method depends on the behavior surviving it. Some examples. So this does not stay abstract. If the person you want to become is somebody whose work is taken seriously, the behavior might be that you send the thing without the apology attached to it. Every time. That is it. If it is somebody who is not afraid of money, the behavior might be that you look at the actual number in your account every morning rather than avoiding it. If it is somebody people trust, the behavior might be that you say the true version of the answer in the first sentence rather than the third. Notice how small those are. Notice also that not one of them is a feeling. You cannot instruct yourself to feel confident. You can absolutely instruct yourself to remove one sentence from an email. That distinction is the entire reason this works, and it was described precisely more than 100 years ago by a man who was not writing about manifestation at all. William James was the first serious professor of psychology in America, and in a lecture published in 1899, he set out the mechanism plainly. Action seems to follow feeling, he wrote, but really, action and feeling go together. And because the action is under the direct control of the will and the feeling is not, you regulate the feeling indirectly by regulating the action. His example was cheerfulness. If you have lost it, the reliable route back is to sit up cheerfully and to act and speak as though the cheerfulness were already there. Read that again with your own aim in it. He is not saying pretend and hope. He is saying that the feeling you cannot reach directly has a back entrance, and the back entrance is behavior, which you can operate at will today in a bad mood. One behavior. Choose it this week. Write it in a form so specific that at the end of any day, you could answer yes or no with no argument. That last condition is not a stylistic preference, so let me be precise about it. Most people write the behavior in a form that cannot be scored, and an unscorable behavior quietly becomes optional within about 9 days. Be more present with my family cannot be answered yes or no. Put the phone in a drawer between 6 and 8 can. Be more confident at work cannot be answered. Speak first in every meeting I attend can. Look after myself better cannot be answered by anybody, ever, which is why it has appeared on your list for 11 years. The test is that a stranger following you around with a clipboard could mark it. If a stranger could not tell whether you did it, neither can you, and neither can the part of you that is keeping score whether you asked it to or not. There is one more filter worth applying before you commit, because it decides whether this is worth the 90 days at all. The behavior must be one that only the new person would do, not one that the new person would do more of. That distinction sounds fussy, and it is the difference between a habit and an identity. Going to bed earlier is a good habit, and it does not tell you anything about who you are, because everybody occasionally goes to bed early. Sending the work without the apology attached is different, because the old version of you was constitutionally incapable of it. Every single time you do it, you are producing a piece of evidence that cannot be explained by the old story. That is what you want. You are not building a routine. You are building a contradiction that the old self-image cannot absorb. Pick the one that makes you slightly uncomfortable to write down. That discomfort is the accurate instrument here, and it is the only one you have this early. Phase 2, days 8 to 21, the part where nothing happens. Now the honest part. For the next 2 weeks, you are going to do the thing correctly, and nothing whatsoever is going to happen. Not slow progress. Nothing. Your circumstances will look identical. Nobody will comment. You will not feel like a different person. And around day 12, you will have a very reasonable thought, which is that this is a slightly embarrassing exercise you are performing in private for no observable reason. I want you to expect that thought on that schedule, because an expected discouragement is a very different animal from an unexpected one. Goddard used to tell a story about a woman living in a rented apartment in the Bronx who wanted a home in the country. She had no money for it and no visible route to it. What he had her do was sleep each night as though she were already in that house. Not think about the house, sleep in it. And she did that night after night for a long stretch in which absolutely nothing in the visible world indicated that anything was happening at all. Eventually, the house arrived by a route she had not been watching. The part of that story people fixate on is the ending. The part that actually teaches is the middle, which is long, boring, and entirely without feedback, and which she went through anyway. Here is what is happening during the nothing, mechanically, so it is less mysterious. Hill had a phrase for it. He called it hypnotic rhythm, and he meant something quite specific and slightly unsettling by it. Any thought or act, repeated often enough, stops requiring a decision. It becomes automatic, and then it becomes what he would have called your nature, and at that point it is no longer something you do, it is something you are. He treated this as a law that runs whether you like it or not, which is why most people are automatically doing things they never chose. What you are doing in these 2 weeks is running that law forwards on purpose. The behavior has not yet become automatic. It still costs you something every single time, and that cost is the whole of the work. The day it stops costing you anything is the day it has been installed, and you cannot rush that day. You can only turn up until it arrives. So the instruction for this stretch is unglamorous. Keep the behavior, do not add a second one, do not improve the system, do not read another book about it. And above all, do not check whether it is working, because there is nothing to check yet, and checking will only produce the answer no. If you want something to do with your hands, keep a single line a day, the date and yes or no. That is the whole record. Its purpose is not motivation. Its purpose is that in 6 weeks, you will look back at it and find you have evidence of being a person who does what he says, and that evidence will be worth more to you than anything you could have felt at the time. I want to sit with the doubt for a moment rather than talk you out of it, because being talked out of it does not work, and you would be right not to trust me if I tried. Around day 12, you are going to think, this is not doing anything. And I want to point out something about that sentence, which is that it is not an observation. It is a prediction dressed as an observation. You have no way of knowing whether it is doing anything on day 12 because the mechanism you are running does not report at day 12. It reports at about day 50. What you actually have on day 12 is an absence of feedback, and your mind is converting an absence of feedback into a verdict because it would rather have a wrong answer than an open question. Every one of these 4 teachers ran into the same problem with the people they taught, and every one of them landed on the same answer, which is that you decide the question in advance and then refuse to reopen it. Not because reopening it is forbidden, but because you have no new information, and reconsidering a decision with no new information is not thinking. It is just discomfort looking for an exit. So the honest instruction for this phase is not believe harder. It is, you are allowed to think this is not working. You are not allowed to act on that thought until day 90, because that is when the information arrives. 2 weeks, 1 line a day, nothing else. Phase 3. Days 22 to 45, the collapse. Somewhere in this stretch, it falls over. Not for everybody, but for most people. And it does not fall over for the reason you have been bracing for. You are expecting to lose motivation. That is not what happens. What happens is that other people react. This is the part almost nobody warns you about, and it is the single biggest reason these attempts die. You have been quietly changing one behavior for 3 weeks. It has started to show in very small ways, and the people around you, who love you, who have known you for years, begin to push back. It rarely arrives as opposition, it arrives as teasing, as a joke at dinner about the new you, as somebody saying with genuine warmth that they liked you better before you got all serious, as concern, as are you sure you are not overdoing this? And you should understand what is actually happening there, because if you read it as an attack, you will get defensive, and if you read it as a verdict, you will stop. It is neither. Every person who knows you carries a version of you in their head, and that version is load-bearing. It tells them who they are in relation to you. When you change, their version of you stops matching, and the cheapest way for anybody to resolve that mismatch is to press the original back into place. They are not trying to hold you back. They are trying to restore a room they were comfortable in. Shin was very good on this, and her advice was consistently the same. Do not argue with it. Do not explain yourself. Do not justify the change. Do not announce what you are doing or why. An announced change invites a referendum, and you are not holding a referendum. Say nothing and continue. The practical form is simple. When it comes, and it will come dressed as affection, do not defend. Do not say, I am trying to become someone. Smile, change the subject, and do the behavior again tomorrow. The commentary stops within about 2 weeks in almost every case, because a version of you that keeps failing to match eventually gets updated. Their picture of you changes because it has to, but it changes late, and only if you refuse to argue about it. There is a second, quieter form of the collapse worth naming. Sometimes nobody says anything at all, and you sabotage it yourself, and you will do it in a way that looks accidental. You will get very busy for 4 days. You will be genuinely ill. You will forget. Watch for the accident that arrives exactly when the thing has started to work, because it is not usually an accident. If you break the run, and many people do, the instruction is 1 sentence. Start again on the same behavior, not a better one, and do not restart the count. You are not collecting a streak. You are installing something, and the installation does not care about your calendar. That point deserves a little more, because the streak mentality has ruined more of these than laziness ever has. People miss a day, decide the attempt is contaminated, and start over from 1, which feels rigorous and is actually a way of never getting past week 4. 4 days missed out of 45 is a 90% installation. It is not a failure, it is a very good result that happens to look untidy on paper. The only real failure available to you here is stopping and not resuming, and that decision is almost always made in the 2 days after a break rather than during it. There is one more thing about this phase that I would rather you heard now than worked out the hard way. You are going to be tempted to explain yourself to somebody. It will feel like honesty. It will feel like you owe them an account of why you have gone quiet or firm or strange. You do not, and the reason is not secrecy for its own sake. It is that describing an unfinished change to somebody invites them to have an opinion about it, and their opinion arrives with more force than yours does, because yours is 3 weeks old and theirs is 20 years old. Hill was blunt about this in his own way. He thought, a plan discussed too early is a plan handed to people who have every reason to prefer the old arrangement, and that the discussion feels productive while doing nothing but leaking pressure. Tell people at day 90, if you tell them at all. By then, it is not a plan you are defending. It is a fact they have already noticed. Phase 4, days 46 to 70. The evidence arrives. Now it changes, and it changes from the outside in, which surprises people every time. You will not wake up feeling like a new person. That is not how the report comes back. What happens instead is that the world starts responding differently, and you notice it before you notice anything about yourself. Somebody asks your opinion who never used to. An opportunity turns up in a conversation you would not previously have been in. Somebody describes you, casually, in words you would not have used about yourself a year ago. Small things, easy to miss, extremely easy to explain away. And there is a straightforward reason for it that requires no mysticism whatsoever, though it is entirely compatible with the way these 4 teachers described it. You have been running a changed behavior for 6 weeks. Behavior is the only part of you that other people can actually see. They have been quietly revising their assessment of you the entire time without telling you, and around this point, the revised assessment starts producing decisions. The stock line for this is that you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and the world rearranges to match. That is exactly what is happening. I am simply pointing out that it has a visible mechanism as well as an invisible one, and that both halves are running. Which brings me to the single most important instruction in this entire video, and it takes 4 seconds a day. Write the evidence down. When something arrives, the day it arrives, write the sentence. Not because the record matters, because the alternative is that you explain it away, and explaining it away is the one thing that can still kill this at day 60. The mind that has spent 45 days being politely skeptical about all of this will look at the first piece of proof and say coincidence, and it will be very convincing when it says it. A written line is harder to argue with than a memory, and you are going to need a stack of them, because what you are building here is not confidence, it is a case. And write down the small ones. This is where people fail at the record, not at the discipline. They wait for something impressive enough to be worth writing, and nothing in the first 2 months is impressive, so nothing gets written. And then at day 80, they cannot remember whether anything happened at all. Write down that somebody asked your opinion. Write down that a conversation went differently than it would have in March. Write down the thing you did without hesitating that you would have hesitated over. It will feel absurdly minor at the time. That is fine. You are not writing a highlight reel. You are assembling the raw material of a different self-assessment. And self-assessments are built out of small, repeated observations rather than out of dramatic ones. There is a second thing worth noticing in this phase, and it is easy to miss because it happens to you rather than around you. At some point in here, you will make a decision quickly that you would previously have agonized over for a week. Not a big one. But you will notice afterwards that the deliberation simply did not happen, and that its absence felt like nothing at all. That is the deepest evidence available in the whole 90 days, and it is almost never recognized as evidence because it arrives as an absence rather than as an event. The old version of you needed to check whether he was allowed to do that. This one did not think to ask. Nothing was overcome. The question just stopped being live. If you catch one of those, write it down twice. And this is roughly the point where I would say, if this is the kind of thing you would like to keep running into for the next few months, Subscribe because the 90 days go a good deal better with something arriving in your week that keeps pointing at the same set of ideas. Phase 5, days 71 to 90, when it stops being an act. There is a specific moment at the end of this, and it has a recognizable feeling. And I want you to know what it is so that you catch it when it happens rather than 6 months later. You will do the behavior, and it will not occur to you that you are doing it. That is the whole event. It is completely undramatic. There is no rush of certainty and no sense of arrival. There is simply an ordinary Wednesday on which the thing that took real effort on day 9 happens without any effort at all, and you only realize afterwards, if you realize at all. That is the moment the act stops being an act. And it is worth being clear about what has actually occurred, because it is not that you got better at pretending, it is that the pretense has been replaced. The behavior is no longer something you are performing on top of who you are. It is a plain description of what you do, which means it is now a plain description of who you are. There is a musician who put this better than most of the literature does. In 2009, in an interview in Rolling Stone, Lady Gaga was asked about the years before anybody knew her name, and she said she used to walk down the street as though she were already a star. And then she said the thing that makes it a teaching rather than an anecdote. She said she wanted people to walk around delusional about how great they can be, and then to fight so hard for it every day that the lie becomes the truth. That last clause is the whole 90 days in 8 words. Not that the lie is harmless, not that you should believe a comfortable thing, that you hold a position that is not yet true and then work daily until reality has no option but to catch up with it. At which point it was never a lie, it was just early. So what do you do in these final 20 days? 2 things, and then you are finished with the protocol. The first is that you add the second behavior, only now, not on day 30 when you were feeling ambitious. The first one has become automatic and costs you nothing, which means you have capacity again, and capacity is what you spend on the next one. This is how people who seem to change enormously actually do it, one at a time, with long gaps over years. It looks like a transformation from outside, and it is really a cue. And choose the second one the same way you chose the first, which means small, scorable, and impossible for the old version of you. There is a strong pull at this stage to make it grand, because you are 3 months in and feeling capable, and capable is exactly the mood in which people take on something that collapses by Friday. The second behavior is not a reward for the first. It is the same size as the first. The only thing that has changed is that you now have the capacity to run 2 of them, and you have that capacity precisely because the first one no longer takes any. There is a version of this arithmetic that is worth doing out loud because it reframes the whole thing. 1 installed behavior every 3 months is 4 a year. 4 a year is not impressive in any single quarter, and it is completely transformative over 3 years. And the reason almost nobody has it is not that the pace is hard. It is that the pace is too slow to be exciting, so people abandon it for something faster that installs nothing at all. You are not in a hurry. That is the actual secret here, and it sounds like a consolation prize until you have watched it work. The people who end up unrecognizable are not the ones who went hardest in January. They are the ones who were still doing one small, unremarkable thing in October, with nobody watching, having long since stopped finding it interesting. Interesting is not a requirement. It was never a requirement. It is simply the thing everyone waits for. And it is the reason a method this plain remains, after 100 years in print, effectively unused. The second is that you go back and read the record, the single lines, the dates and the yeses, the evidence you wrote down in phase 4 when you did not yet believe it. Read the whole thing in one sitting, because at day 90, that stack of paper is the most valuable thing you own on this subject. It is not motivation, and it is not a memory. It is a documented account of a person who decided something and then did it for 3 months, while nothing encouraged him, and several people gently suggested he stop. You cannot argue with that. Neither can the part of you that has been arguing this whole time. And that is what people are reacting to when they say, "You seem different," and cannot say why. They are not seeing a new personality. They are seeing somebody who has stopped negotiating with himself, and it comes off a person like a temperature. So, 90 days, one behavior, small enough to survive your worst day, 2 weeks of nothing, expected and endured. A collapse around week 4 that arrives as affection rather than opposition and is answered with silence and repetition rather than argument. Evidence from outside written down the day it arrives. And then an ordinary Wednesday where the thing costs you nothing at all. You do not need to feel ready. Readiness is a feeling, and we established at the start that the feelings come second and arrive on their own schedule. You need to pick the behavior tonight and be specific enough that tomorrow evening you can say yes or no. Everything after that is just turning up.